Hi, and welcome to Helping People Perform, the podcast that gives you fascinating insights into those people whose chosen vocation is to help others perform at their best. From consultants to teachers, sports coaches to financial advisors, all of my guests share a passion for getting the most out of individuals, teams, and organisations. Enjoy the episode. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Helping People Perform podcast. Today I'm joined by Katz, founder and CEO of Beep and Chair of Trustees at Frontline Live. So welcome to the show, Katz.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's really exciting.
Pleasure to have you on. And we've got a lot to talk about, some great stuff that you both have done and do right now. So if we could start with a bit of background, what have you done to get yourself to where you are today?
How long do you got? So at the beginning of my career, in the sort of folly of youth, I could see that something was really crazy. And this was big corporations,
Yep.
The media companies, the tech companies, the telcos, all of the people that I was working with at the time had no idea that digital was going to change their world.
Right.
And on the other side, I was working with all these incredible innovators and startups that were just making stuff happen really quick and really cheap. And so I'm seeing startups, innovators needing money, and the big companies really needing innovation, and they weren't talking to each other.
Right.
So I thought, I'm going to set up a company and do that. I'm going to figure out how to get the big companies to talk to the innovators and have meaningful relationships. So we did two things. One of them was we set up a big event, which happened once a year. And it brought together people that I called between people.
Right.
They were the kind of people who are inside organizations, big, small artists, but people who like to see the links between things.
Right.
So people who were constantly looking to make things better and were fascinated by digital. So it was an amazing event, and people still say to this day, when are you going to start doing between again? That was the best thing that ever happened. And it was good because we treated it like an experience. It wasn't a conference.
Right.
It was an opportunity for the people in the room to meet people they would never meet, so that they could figure out how they could collaborate. And to get different people speaking to each other, we really messed around with formats and started using technology to show the people in the room what was possible. So I think we were the very first ever event to use a Twitter form.
Right.
Because I had this idea that actually I would never be the sort of person who would stand up in a conference and go, "Hi, I'm Katz Kiely, and I'm the founder and CEO of Beep, and I do this, that." I just never do that. It's not for me. Yeah. So I loved the idea that anyone could ask a question and you could democratize the conference space in that way. I think we were the first people to ever do a web stream from an event, because it was back in the days where they were like, you can't, if you stream it, nobody will buy tickets. It was right. Like, I think they will, because it's a really different experience. So the event was one thing, and that was our kind of sales platform, come together, figure out what's possible in the digital world. And then we also set up the very first ever open innovation competition platform, which was way before its time. Katzys are very good at doing things before their time. And it basically, we would work with clients to help them figure out what they needed to do better.
Right.
We'd make it sure it's really concise and simple. And then we put that out to our ecosystem of innovators. And it was an open gallery, and we used influencer power in a way that wasn't happening at the time. It was kind of social before social. And so we'd help the crowd would help us to figure out which were the best answers to the client question.
Right.
And we'd choose 10 of them. We'd help them to learn to pitch properly. So by the time they got in front of the board of the company we were working with, they knew how to express what they wanted to do to the clients in a way that the client could hear it and understand it. Brilliant. Really good fun. Worked with lots of different people. Until we realized that you can get the most creative, the most innovative, the most spectacular people into large corporations, and they would get chewed up and spat out.
Right.
Every time. It might take 6 months, it might take a year, but we realized the operating models that these companies were using were the environments that they created were diametrically opposed to the environments in which people can innovate, be creative. So we started working on the inside of corporations, looking at innovation labs and using digital for internal communications, and got very good at experimenting. And let me be clear, half of the time we did not know what was going to happen, and it was the fun of the game, wasn't it? In that particular decade where we were all trying to figure out what worked and what didn't. And then I got headhunted by the UN.
Wow.
Which was quite something. And the UN is, if you can imagine, the most bureaucratic, hierarchical corporation you've ever worked for, and times it by 10.
Wow.
You end up with where the agency that I worked in was at that time. I'm not saying it is now, because things have most definitely changed. But it was a digital transformation program. And what I realized there was that if I'd have gone in there and gone, I'm a technical expert, we're going to use these digital technologies, and people would have just resisted it. There would have been no change going on. But I didn't. I went in, I was humble. I said, I don't know this organization, and I only know what I can know. Found change agents, heard what they had to say about what they wanted to do better, had design thinking workshops. So it was all about, you've got the answers here, I'm just here to help you. And then when we had a clear vision of where we wanted to go, then we could start talking about tech.
Right.
Oh, well, how can we do that? Okay, well, yeah, that's fine. We could definitely get a license for that. So it was very successful, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done, and the best thing I've ever done all at the same time. I learned a lot about, at the end of the day, even the most change-resistant organizations can be changed if you do it with people, not to them.
That's vital, isn't it?
Yes. And then I left there, and because I'm a geek, and because my brain works in a particular way, I needed to understand why people are so change resistant, and why the approaches that I'd learned to use by trial, accident, error, experimentation. So why do they work when so many ways of doing transformation don't? So I got really into behavioral science and started to understand how we make decisions, and the kind of the predispositions that stop us being the best we can be, but also can be used to help people be the best they can be. So, that's when I met Dan Ariely, who literally changed my life and has continued to do so ever since. Do you know who he is?
I don't know Dan, no.
Dan Ariely is the best known behavioral psychologist in the world.
Right. There shall be links.
So the two books that were most formative for me, the first one was called Predictably Irrational.
Okay.
And what that was about is the fact that the whole of the economic system, most of our systems, our political systems, our work systems, are all set up based upon an erroneous assumption. And that erroneous assumption is that we're rational. We make rational decisions. We do not.
No.
We make decisions and we rationalize them. So the first one's about that. The second one, which is called The Upside of Irrationality, is about the fact that if we understand our predispositions and we can use them to redesign the way we do things, that's an amazing thing, because we're at a point in time where we're starting to understand the brain on an individual level, but also at a social level. And so we can start to harness that to make sure that the things that we may have gotten wrong can be put right. I would say that one of those things, and relevant to this podcast, is those operating models. Which are, at the moment, in most corporations, as diametrically opposed to the conditions in which humans thrive as they could literally possibly be.
Yeah, it's an amazing setup, isn't it? And thanks for that. I'm going to put the links to those books into the show notes as well. And I've noted them down not only for this podcast, but I'm going to be getting my read on and getting my own geek on and following up on that. So appreciate
Phenomenal.
you.
He is the most extraordinary chap. And I was lucky enough to have him on my podcast as well. And the thing about Dan is you very rarely hear him just talking.
Right.
He's doing the talk that he's doing at that time. And he's a global, he's famous as hell. So you go out to dinner with him and people literally walk up to him and go, oh my God, it's Dan Ariely. Yeah. But yeah, for this podcast, we just talked about how people, even though all of the data is there, all of the research is there to show leaders how to lead properly, they still go back to normal. This is how we do things. And it's nonsensical. Yeah.
No, it's there's two things that spring to mind on that one for me. One is the sort of spring back from people having to go back into the office right now and all of that hybrid working piece, but also classrooms. You talk about diametrically opposed to actual learning. Let's sit our kids down, tell them to be quiet and do that. There's so much science out there that says this isn't the right thing to do, and somewhere along the lines we've got to shake that up to really make a step change, haven't we?
And it has to be, you're exactly right to say that, and it's something that's on my mind a lot of the time, that if we don't embed expectations and behaviors in children when they're at school, we're getting something horrifically wrong. And our education system does not do that in the main at all. Right. We're preparing people for a world that doesn't exist, and a world that actually didn't make much sense anyway when it did, I would say.
Oh, fascinating. Well, talk on this for hours, I'm sure. But getting into some of the things that you do now then, I mean, amazing background and some of the stuff that you've done there and working with the UN and those huge scale digital transformation pieces that you're talking about, it's what have you moved that into in terms of BEEP and your being the chair of trustees and things like that? What does today hold for you, Katz? How do you help people?
So, gosh, that's really interesting that you're bringing those two things in. So I have, the core of my work is if you can unhide blockers to excellence, if you can see the truth, if you can see problems, people will rally around to solve them. Right. Unfortunately, most leaders in most companies put their fingers in their ears and go la 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 la, because if you listen to what employees say, you might hear something you don't want to hear. Well, I think that's pretty nonsensical, personally. Yeah. So I also know that if you bring people together in design thinking workshops, rapid prototyping workshops, around challenges that they all care about, yes, and they share, the most incredible thing happens. It's like the people in the room connect with each other. And so those two things put together are exactly what we do as a business, which is help large corporations to surface the blockers, the barriers, the behaviors that are getting in the way of brilliance, getting in the way of speed, agility, all of those things that people talk about all of the time. So we help them to surface those blockers, and we give them the tools and the capability and the mindsets and the behaviors so that people feel empowered to get together with people from other parts of the organization and find fixes for them. Right. Because amazingly, most of these little blockers that we all put up with on a daily basis, and nobody really finds time to fix them, they are the source of such an enormous lack of productivity, lack of efficiency. So that's what we do. And we do that for large corporations, tends to be over 1,000 people. Right. And we help them understand better what their culture is now. So we do a cultural audit. Yep. Based upon this thing that I've pulled together over the years called the CREATE framework. Nice. Which I'll give you the link for. But basically, it's a really useful, helpful framework for leaders to just, in one place, see the conditions that are most important for people to be as productive as they can be. So right. C stands for community. Do people watch each other's backs? Right. Collaboration. Do people feel okay to be able to find people from other places and just do stuff with them? Co-creation. If you co-create things with people, they feel like they own that thing and they want it to work. R stands for reward and recognition. And so we go through the letters of create. So we do an audit, help them to understand where they really are rather than where they would like to be. Give them an idea of what brilliant could look like. And then we go through senior leaders, get them to feel safe with behaving in a different way by talking about the things that are blocking them being brilliant.
Right.
Then the next level down, then we start finding change agents. And then being the geek that I think I've already said I am, I kind of thought a few years ago, well, if you can do the same thing over and over and over again, and we keep doing this for clients and using bits of technology and tacking them together, surfacing shared challenges, finding change agents, giving them a voice, helping them to understand that they can fix most of these things themselves without having to wait for the board to fix them for them. I thought, well, if you do that again and again, there must be a way of turning it into a software platform.
Right.
So that's the kind of the really most interesting, the thing that I'm loving the most at the moment is the development. We've just got patent pending on the technology, and it does exactly that. It incentivizes people at all levels, in all regions, to surface the things that are getting in the way of them doing their best work. And if enough people across the organization rally around that beep, they can self-organize their own design thinking workshop to find a fix.
Wow. Oh, it's brilliant stuff. There's so many things that hit home in terms of that, the co-creation, and the answers are in an organization. I found it difficult in my early years as a consultant, the bit of I'm going in and I'm just giving you the same answers that all you're doing is getting me to talk to your people and then talk to you and tell you what they've told you. Why am I here? But unfortunately, there is a need for that in a lot of cases. But actually, how can we build this out and build that capability across organizations so that it can actually recognize that great stuff? And the other thing that hit home to me is I spent a few years working with McLaren, the Formula One team. That's a lot of my history recently. And we talk about culture of responsibility through data in that case. But it's more that it's those blockers and those things that people are hiding behind. If the data is there and you trust the data, or if you trust that this is the actual truth of what's happening, then as long as everybody agrees that's the truth, then you've got nowhere to hide. And it becomes much easier in those cases to say, I messed up. There's no point in saying I didn't mess up because the data fully backs up that I did. We talk about a driver going into a corner and their hands are slightly in the wrong position compared to where they should be ideally. The data, by the time you're out of the corner, tells you that. So there's no point in the driver saying, oh, it wasn't my fault, it was the engineer's fault. Well, no, by having that truth in place, people can say, it was something that I did. Let's learn from it, let's move on, let's get better.
And that's it. And so what's really interesting about what you've just said there is I've been in so many organizations where you start talking about data as a tool for improvement. And nobody really wants to start sharing their data, because if they share it, somebody might think they've done something wrong. And that's why it's important, if you're going to move towards data informed, and I always say data informed rather than data led, you have to do it alongside a change of culture and a change of mindsets and a change of behaviors, by which I mean, if everyone knows that every little thing that goes wrong is a way by which they can make things better, then people are incentivized to speak up. It's like, no, this is not working. As opposed to doing what most companies do and just put up with it. Otherwise, somebody might look bad. And actually, there's a culture of fear. And so 100% agree with you. Data is either the biggest stick or the biggest carrot, depending on how you choose to use it.
Yeah, it's got to be hand in hand with the culture, hasn't it?
Yes, yes. Otherwise, people go, ooh, data sharing.
The other bit there you mentioned about being chair of trustees at Frontline Live. Tell us a bit more about the work that happens there.
So at the beginning of the COVID nightmare, I find myself back in Sheffield in my little house here, which was Airbnb'd, thinking, oh my God, what's going on? Anyway, I talked to a friend of mine, and who's a nurse, and I was saying, I can't get shopping delivery. I don't know what I'm going to do. And she went, oh, that's a shame. Well, I'm going to work tomorrow, and we'll probably deal with people with COVID, and we haven't got any masks. So let's put that in context.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, okay, how much that? I get it. And so then I became, and also I was talking to some people who are doing some work around open source technologies and sort of citizen activism, etc. And so I put a call out on social media. Yes, the other thing that was happening is these people going into work without protection, the government and senior leadership, because they didn't want to look bad, were telling these people to be quiet. Well, I'm sorry, that's not okay. So I thought, well, how hard would it be to create a platform where people on the front line could anonymously say what they were running short of? We could plot it on a digital map so that the people who want to help, the small companies, the citizen activists, the community groups, can get them what they need to bridge the gap. So I put a call out on social media, and about 40 people jumped in, all sorts of amazing people.
Yeah.
And we had it launched within 4 weeks. And fast forward a year, where we've had Snapchat jump on board to do stuff with us for free, Microsoft, Ocean Outdoor gave us 16 out of home screens to put stuff out on. It was the most extraordinary thing. And guess what? If you can see a problem, people will rally around to solve it.
Yeah.
So by the end of the year, we had about 500,000 pieces of PPE delivered to the front line across our ecosystem. So then we spent last year making the open source technology more open source and more robust. And again, Microsoft have been incredible on that. And talking to loads of different NGOs about how this platform, this open source platform, which is made to enable and empower continuous improvement by connecting people who are not normally connected. What can we do to help? And then, of course, the war started. And one of our amazing volunteers, who's been there since the very beginning, turned up at one of our meetings and in tears saying, isn't this what we've been set up to do? And so we redesigned the code, we relaunched in Ukraine, and on the 1st of December, we're going to be launching our first crowdfunding campaign to crowdfund for generators, because obviously there's a terrible problem with electricity, but also the 6 medical items that have been most requested by our registered charities, so that we can allow the people who want to help, and in a way that's transparent and accountable. So if I put money into a defibrillator, I want to be able to see that defibrillator being delivered to somebody in Ukraine. So that's exactly what we're doing.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. It's fantastic work. Because I mean, I know of stories of individuals in particular, but in small groups, but individuals during the COVID times who would take it upon themselves, because they had a car and because they could get out, they would get whatever PPE they could get their hands on and literally drive around their local hospitals and surgeries and things like that, but without really knowing exactly what individuals wanted. So people want to help in those circumstances. Yes. Big shout out to Steve Huxley, by the way, for the work he did there. And yeah, just connecting those people with where is their help having the most impact. Because like I've had lots of times, it's like, I want the help, but I don't know how. And just tell people this is how, and people will help, won't they? Oh, that's an amazing piece. So
I'll give you a link to. So we've now got about 10 volunteers, maybe more, who are working with us on top of their full-time jobs. And one of them's just delivered. Reese has just delivered this beautiful little video to explain the whole ethos behind who we are, why we are. So I'll give you the link to that as well.
Oh, superb! Definitely going in the notes there. Awesome. Okay, so moving this.
Your head's buzzing now.
Yeah, it is. Too many ideas. I'll be speaking to you afterwards. In terms of your own performance, then, where do you go? Who do you speak to? How do you get improvements in your own performance in whatever context that means for you?
So I am extraordinarily lucky in that I've got an amazing network of people who either I've worked with or we share the same vision. So I've got advisors who I'll just phone up and chat to when I'm feeling insane, because it's not easy to be an entrepreneur, is it?
No, certainly isn't. No.
It's a lonely old thing. And so I've got a network of kind of amazing people who help me think things through. I always call it like being almost, they're often just a cardboard analyst.
Okay.
They're there to allow me to find the answer that I can't get to when I'm on my own.
Right.
And I've got the most extraordinary network of women friends. One particular group, the cool chicks, we call them, 4 women, all very geeky, all doers, all activists in their own way.
Yeah.
From the beginning of COVID till the end of COVID, at 7 o'clock every Friday night, we spent an hour together.
Right.
Sharing. And yeah, I genuinely don't know what I would do without my girlfriends.
Yeah. No, it's those networks, and particularly the less formal networks as well. But I found, like, being over the last year or so, being truly out on my own, it was kind of a little bit different before this, but just having someone to go, it doesn't even have to be about the subject of work, and then just having a little chat about something, you suddenly find your brain going, oh, that's a connection, that can happen. But without that connection to people, it's a very difficult thing to do just on your own, isn't it?
And meditation, as you're saying that, I think meditation for me has, again, kept me sane, because clearing your mind for long enough to be for the truth to appear to you.
Right.
Because, my brain's very busy a lot of the time, but actually just stopping. But no, absolutely. I think, and the other thing that I would say is, as an example, I've just made a new 1-pager for Beep, because it's quite complex if you don't understand all the thinking behind it. So how do you then simplify that down to something where people go, oh yeah, it's really obvious.
Right.
And so I had a go, and I'm on lots of networks, WhatsApp groups, and I've literally just said, look, has anybody got 20 minutes? Because I'd love to show you this thing and get your feedback.
Right.
And I don't know, 10 people did exactly that.
Yeah.
And now I'm at a place where I heard and saw what they read so that I could improve it. Because for me, everything can be better always. That's my basic premise. So, and when I'm talking to clients, I'll say, what landed with you?
Right. Yep.
How did that feel? And they're not questions people ask each other, but I don't really understand why.
Yeah, I was having a conversation earlier today as well about just the power of just asking people for their opinion or asking people for their time. Yes. It's amazing how generous people can be with their time and their efforts and their feedback, isn't it? If you just ask.
People love it. It's very rarely that somebody will go, I'm sorry, I'm too busy.
Yeah.
It does happen, but you probably don't really want the advice of those people anyway.
Fantastic.
My house for dinner parties.
Okay. So
there's neuroscience behind that as well. So I think if we're brutally honest and look at the research, people do good because it feels good.
Yep.
We are absolutely selfish creatures. And even philanthropy is something that, if you look at the science behind it, it's because it makes us release neurochemicals that make us feel warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of doing people a favor by asking them for their help, in truth.
Yeah. Well, there's a lesson for all of our listeners out there. Get asking.
And be that person who'll really, really happily give your time for others as well. It brings back huge bonuses.
It does. Couple of quick fire questions as we move on. In terms of any group, individual, organization that you would love to work with, that you believe your skill set could really add some value?
I was thinking about this, and my answer would be the public sector, the civil service.
Wow.
And I'll tell you for why, because I have done some bits and pieces of work for councils. And when you work for a corporate, you're working for a corporate so that you can end up making loads of money. So there's a why there. And therefore you may expect to put up with some pretty terrible management. because you know you're going to be. In the public sector, people don't sign up because they want to earn loads of money. They sign up because they really, really want to help, whatever it is. And unfortunately, and I'd say the same for most charities, and I'm spending a lot of time talking to charities because of Frontline Live, their operating models are so fundamentally outdated and broken that they're going through worse leadership and management often, and not through anybody's fault. There's some amazing people working in the public sector. But I just think it's so important that people are rewarded and recognized and given the environments in which they can thrive. And especially now, you know, because clearly the government aren't supporting the public sector in the way they should. And I also, a bit contentious, you know, there's a lot of money goes out through the public sector. And if the individuals who are working within those organizational structures are not able to give their best because it's so broken, so siloed, so bureaucratic, etc., that's not good for the efficiency of the country either. So I would say I'd like to be doing a lot more transformative work with leaders inside the civil service and the public sector.
Fantastic. I did some public sector work for the first time earlier this year. I'd always been private till then, and I was amazed by the quality of people, but also how, and the passion that they had, but how they were hogtied a lot of the time by the systems and processes that they had in place, which they had some control over in some ways, and what they could do, they were desperately trying to. But a lot of the time, it's like, as you say, it's the operating environment, it's the whole setup that really puts things in its handcuffs, should we say?
And you know, unnecessary governance, and I mean, it's just outdated. And I almost feel like being able to go and talk to the government and saying, you know, rather than you cutting costs, how about you do something about incentivizing people to make sure you're getting the best out of the people rather than just firing them and leaving everybody behind feeling worse? I mean, there's no common sense there.
No, it's not. From
a kind of neuroscience point of view, what you're doing is you're leaving a culture of fear, and a culture of fear will never get the best out of people.
Oh, and I'm going to flip. This is too good. Flipping the conversation on its head a little bit. Who would you love to sit down with, have a cup of coffee, have a glass of wine, that you think would actually help you perform at your best?
So this is such an interesting question, and I've been thinking about it. And there's, in a way, all of the things that I talk about, and no doubt you're talking about, which are about creating environments in which humans thrive. This has been going on for hundreds of years. It's like, you know, the industry leaders, the Quakers at the beginning of industry realized if you give people the best environment and build a community, they will do their best work for you. So I'd love to sit down with some of those people and hear the reality of those stories so that I can convey them to the people who are leading now in this quite broken way of doing things. But also, I'd really love to talk to Mark Benioff.
Right.
Mark Benioff has been, whatever you may think of him, he's been my hero and an inspiration to me, because my plan with Beep, the technology, is that every time we sell a license to a corporate, we'll gift a license to a not-for-profit working towards the Sustainable Development Goals.
Brilliant.
And I genuinely, as a thought piece, let me throw this at you. What would the world look like if policymakers made it impossible to incorporate a business unless you had doing good built into your business DNA?
It would look a lot different to what it is right now, that's for sure.
Right? You know, nobody would be minding Amazon growing as big as it is if every pound of profit did something good for the world. And I believe it's entirely possible. But the reason I said about Mark Benioff is because he found it really hard to get investment, as I've done, because he wouldn't drop this one-to-one thing. He's always built doing good into the way that his business works. And I think that's an inspiration. But, you know, he started the cloud-based enterprise SaaS thing anyway. But was so committed to this doing good as well. I don't know whether that's still the case inside Salesforce. I don't know Salesforce well, but it's an inspiration for me. So I'd love to sit down and get some tips from him.
Brilliant. No, I a lot of the stuff I talk to my clients about when it comes to results in particular, I talk about what do you want to achieve, but how do you want to achieve it? Because you can achieve profit, you can achieve, great sales or great productivity, whatever it might be. But if it's done at the expense of what really matters to you, then either legally or ethically, sustainably, whatever that is that really means something to you, then firstly, as an organization, you're not going to be the organization you want to be. And secondly, I think this is now the sustainability angle, the D&I agenda, everything. It's becoming less of a nice to have, as it should become less of a nice to have, and more of an absolute necessity for organizations. And I love what you're saying there about the one-to-one, etc.
100%.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
But I also think that humans are fundamentally selfish. And unless you have doing good built into your hardwired into your minds and arts, it's very easy for a bad leader to come in and change things and refocus. I think it needs to be central rather than a periphery piece that people can choose or not. So this is just one of my little bugbears. And I know from all of my financial planning with the software, you can absolutely do that. And we also will get more data, which will be really useful, and we can help the companies with their ESG, with their non-financial reporting. There's a load of really good common sense behind that. So it's not just wanting to do good, although it really is just wanting to do good.
Well, that's good stuff. So how do people find out more? Where do we go to find out more about Beep and about Frontline Live? Apologies.
Frontline Live. So wearebeep.com is my company's website. I'm Katz Kiely. It's so easy to find me online. It's ridiculous.
Can't be many of you.
And frontlinemap.org is where the fundraising portal will be from the 1st of December. And the actual Ukrainian registered charity data platform is at frontlineliveukraine.org.
Okay.
And I have to say that talking about purpose, the fact that not one penny's changed hands for all this to happen. This has all been done by the good of people's hearts. And that feels great. Do you know, this is like my philosophy and my science brought to life. I mean, it's incredible what people will do when they feel they're making a difference.
Yeah. Amazing stuff. And I'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes and everybody has the opportunity to support in whatever way they can. And do reach out, go to We Are Beep, go to Frontline Live, reach out to Katz, I'm sure, if you've got any opportunities to support that yourself. So a great purpose and a great organization. So Katz, really enjoyed our chat today. Hope it's been good for you, and hope our listeners have found some true inspiration and some true thoughts there as to how they can help others perform as well as helping themselves. So thanks for coming on.
I should mention, and also the Create framework is at katzkeely.com.
Okay.
You can go and find your cultural audit framework is just there. So just go in and go and have a look and think about
Fantastic.
how you do. Thank you so much, Paul. It's been really, really, really good. I know I chat a lot, but that's just me.
An absolute pleasure. And thanks for your time, Katz.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, then please give the podcast a rate, review, and share. I'm Paul Teasdale, and from sausage making to banking, oil and gas to Formula One, I help people perform. If you'd like to find out more and have a conversation, contact me via helpingpeopleperform.com.